Given the current talk of digital and omnichannel, it's never been more incumbent on insurance companies to adapt their offerings and service levels to meet customer demands. However, the burden of legacy IT infrastructure weighs heavily on many, as a recent survey conducted by Post in association with CSC discovered, with 2/5 still spending 70% of their IT budget maintaining and running their organisations rather than changing them. My name is Jonathan Swift, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio today by CSC's Patrick Molyneux to discuss the findings of this survey and also look at how insurers can maximise their budgets to take advantage of the opportunities that exist today. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you.
So, Patrick, what were your biggest take-homes from the findings in the survey?
I think three things. First of all, there's been a kind of meme ever since in my 30 years in the insurance industry about IT budgets in insurance going down, going down, going down. And we're starting to see IT budgets going up, and we're starting to see a shift, a change of emphasis from IT departments having to spend on run to being able to spend a little bit more on change, a little bit more in innovation, and that's really the first time we've seen that. So we're starting to see the amount that has to be spent on keeping the lights on reducing, and that's actually it's probably the first time I've actually seen that happening. I think a second thing that was really interesting was cloud. A few years back, obviously we see in our business in CSC a lot of requests for information, requests for proposal, and you go back a few years and cloud was hardly mentioned, just a few years and cloud was hardly mentioned. Then it was, well, we might be interested in what your cloud strategy is. And now we're seeing 2/3 of insurers either saying they're heavily invested in cloud or that their cloud spend is increasing. We still see plenty who are saying no cloud, but 2/3 of insurers have significant and growing cloud strategies. I think that's pretty significant. And I think the third thing around legacy modernisation and application modernisation is that still the biggest area of spend, and the urgency of that seems to have increased in that if you go back a few years, certainly the insurers that I spoke to were yes, looking at application modernisation and legacy modernisation, but that was really around cost reduction. Now there's a recognition of a need to modernise their applications to unlock digital insurance, as you said at the beginning. Your differentiator in digital is the data that you've got. Where is that data? It's in your legacy platforms. Unless you modernise the wretched things, how can you actually access that data and present it through your digital channels?
So did the top three answers where respondents had prioritised their change budgets, and these were client servicing, new business, policy administration, surprise you in any way?
Well, the last of them, policy administration, initially did. I kind of thought, oh God, not still. I mean, I joined the insurance industry sort of 30 years ago with Sun Alliance at the time, implementing big mainframe policy administration systems, and still 30 years on, policy administration is one of the big areas. And certainly, insurers are spending money on implementing Guidewire or Duck Creek or TCP in the protection space. They're implementing these policy administration systems. But so that surprised me initially, but then as I thought about it, it goes back to that urgency around unlocking the data and transforming your systems of record to enable your systems of engagement. Systems of engagement with customers, with agents, that's where people need to be. But you can't do that until you fix your systems of record. I think if we look at client servicing, no, that didn't surprise me. I would have expected client servicing to be a big priority, and certainly the insurers I speak to, it's a big priority, because as insurance product itself becomes more commoditized, certainly in personal lines and in life protection business, then the differentiator in a commoditized market has to be your customer servicing. So customer servicing, an obvious priority. And new business, again, as product becomes more commoditized, so the focus on switching becomes easier in a commoditized product, so a need to focus on new business.
So you've already mentioned about the fact you were quite happy to see that some IT budgets were actually increasing, but there are a number that are still static, and some are indeed actually going backwards. I mean, how can insurers look to maximise that spend on changing their organisation, given the fact that they only have a finite amount of money here?
I think for almost all my career, that's been an incredibly hard question to answer. And vendors and suppliers have come up with a whole lot of marketing flim-flam around how we'll implement this project and it will save you millions, but the trouble is it will cost you millions. I actually think now the answer to that question has become pretty straightforward for the first time. And the answer is implementing infrastructure as a service, call it cloud, call it private cloud, call it hybrid cloud, doesn't matter, who cares. Implementing infrastructure as a service, shifting away from first generation infrastructure. We've now got sufficient evidence that doing that can save anywhere from 50 to 70% in your technology infrastructure budget without huge capital investment. Now, if what an insurer can do is save 50 to 70% in their infrastructure spend, that can be reinvested in digital, in application modernization. So for the first time, I think, we're seeing, I was talking to somebody the other day who was talking about, is it a kind of sloping reduction in infrastructure spend? And it isn't, it's a cliff. You can take in one financial year your traditional infrastructure spend. And if you got the nerve to do it, and it does take a bit of nerve and it takes some selling to the senior executive, but if you can do that, you can switch your infrastructure spending towards infrastructure service, drive out very significant savings very rapidly and reinvest that. So even if your budget's static, you can start to drive greater innovation.
And are there any signs of encouragement that the insurers are actually rebalancing that spend between run and change? And do you think, or what do you think is driving that?
I think it is the whole area of digital, that is happening. And I think it's the whole area of digital and customer engagement that is starting to drive that. If you have what is fundamentally a commoditized product, then and a commoditized digital product, which is what insurance is, then the way in the modern world that you engage as a customer with that digital product is through technology. And so insurers need to start thinking themselves almost as technology firms that underwrite insurance. And so that, I think, is driving this change. It's not about having a website. It's not about having a mobile app. Nobody will download the damn thing if you're an insurer. It's about having an end-to-end digital strategy to engage with digital consumers through the life cycle of the product. And I think the incredibly exciting thing, particularly for personal lines insurers, more so perhaps than in any other space, is that the traditional point of engagement, either at renewal, I'm taking your money, or at claim, I'm really anxious and terrified because something horrible's happened, can start to become a much more active and proactive engagement over time to help work with the consumer on understanding the risk that they're taking on, and we're starting to see that in personal lines, and that's where I think insurers can actually use technology to change how they relate to consumers, and that, I think, is what is driving it.
Well, Patrick, unfortunately that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for answering my questions. If you'd like to find out more about the survey that Post Magazine has carried out in association with CSC, which is called Save a Pound to Spend a Pound, you can download it now on insurancehound.co.uk. Thanks again to CSC and to Patrick, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.